Good morning, year two. This is Friday's guided reading lesson. As always, if you'd rather read this story independently, I'll attach the text to the homework. But if you want to listen to me read it, I'm about to do that. So this is the second part of Hanuman's adventures. So make sure you've listened to the first part before you listen to this one, otherwise it's going to spoil the story. So if you remember, this is another retelling of the Rama and Sita traditional tale. Except this time we're learning about it from Hanuman's point of view. Now, where we finished yesterday, Hanuman had tried to fly to the island of Lanka, where Ravana the demon had kidnapped Sita. But on his way, he had been swallowed up, gobbled up by a sea monster called Sarasa. And we're going to find out what happens to him next, right now. Hanuman slipped down the monster's throat and landed in her cavernous stomach with a jolt. A vile stench hit him. Around him were the skeletons of the other sea creatures that the monster had gobbled. "Help!" Hanuman cried. "How will I get out?" he thought. Then he had an idea. Using his powers, he changed into a bee and began to sting Sarasa. "Ouch!" the sea monster screamed, doubling over in pain. "Stop! Please stop!" But Hanuman did not stop. Finally, Sarasa heaved and opened her mouth wide, and Hanuman flew out. Quickly, he took a deep breath, and his body began to grow tall and mighty into its usual giant size. Then he leapt into the air, stopping only when he landed on the island of Lanka. Soon Hanuman came to a hill hidden among a thick grove of Asoka trees. He could see a tall fortress on the hill that twinkled with lights. Taking a deep breath, he changed himself into a cat and crept inside the fortress. He checked many rooms, but he could not find Sita. Then he heard a loud noise and followed it to a huge room. He froze. On a big golden bed, Ravana lay with his 10 ugly heads and his 10 sets of jaws wide open, snoring. But there was no sign of Sita. Hanuman wandered into the garden. There, under an Asoka tree, a woman in a white sari sat hugging her knees, crying. She was surrounded by demons, all fast asleep. In the light of the moon, Hanuman saw her face. It was so beautiful that he was sure the moon would hide in shame. She must be Sita, he thought. She is exactly as Rama described her. Slowly, he crept up to Sita's delicate feet and purred. She looked at him in surprise. "Please don't cry," he said. "I am Hanuman, the monkey god. Lord Rama has sent me with this ring." Sita knew the ring immediately and smiled through her tears. "Is Rama well?" Hanuman nodded just as a cry rang out in the darkness. "Catch that talking black cat!" Hanuman ran, but the guards caught him and took him to Ravana. "Burn the wretched animal," Ravana roared, furious to have been roused for just a silly cat. So the guards grabbed Hanuman's tail, wrapped it in a rag dipped in oil, and set it on fire. Hanuman used his powers to make his tail grow bigger and bigger. Puzzled, the guards kept on wrapping his tail with more and more rags, but it just kept growing. You can see that long tail up there at the top in the illustration. Hanuman escaped. He ran all over the island, spreading the fire. Then one flying leap brought him back to the sea, where he dipped his tail in the cool water. He prayed to the gods to keep Sita safe and swore to return with Rama to save her. Taking a deep breath, he grew back to his giant size and leapt back to the mainland, where Rama waited patiently. "Sita is well," Hanuman told Rama, "but she is a prisoner of Ravana, guarded by hundreds of demons." Meanwhile, on Lanka, Ravana and his demon guards used every container they had to carry water from the sea to put out the great fire. By the time the fire was out, they had used up nearly all of the seawater and could see the ocean floor. Back in the forest, Hanuman and Rama watched the level of the sea recede further and further and were overjoyed. Sarasa the sea monster would die without water. They made a plan to attack Ravana. Hanuman and the monkeys rolled boulders and dropped them into what was left of the sea until they had built a long bridge that stretched all the way to Lanka. Finally, the march to the island began. Ravana laughed when he heard about Hanuman, Rama, and the approaching monkeys. Foolish Rama, we'll win this battle in the blink of an eye. The drums rolled, and the Battle of Lanka began. What a fierce battle it was! Rama and his brother Lakshmana, both accomplished archers, shot their arrows, killing hundreds of demons, while Hanuman and his monkey army picked up rocks and trees and hurled them at their enemies. Soon it was clear that Rama and the monkeys were winning the war. Fuming, Ravana entered the battlefield. I will kill Rama myself. He towered before Rama like an enormous volcano about to erupt, as flames leapt out of his 10 noses and smoke billowed out of his 20 ears. Hanuman knelt down and let Rama climb onto his shoulder. Ravana laughed. He whipped his 20 arms into a whirlwind. Rama fired a rush of fiery arrows that hit Ravana's heads, but as soon as one of his heads fell, another appeared in its place. Hanuman looked up at Rama and whispered in his ear. Rama nodded, took aim, and shot his last arrow. It arched in the sky like Lord Indra's thunderbolt and hit Ravana's navel. That's his belly button. Suddenly, Ravana exploded into a ball of fire. The demon was dead. Everyone cheered as Hanuman led Rama into the garden where Sita was waiting. Overjoyed, Rama and Sita hugged each other, crying tears of joy, and then turned to thank Hanuman and his monkeys. Rama reached out and held Hanuman's big paw. I am Vishnu, the Lord of creation. I have come to earth in the body of a prince to fight evil. I will never forget what you did for us. And that's the end. And there's one more picture to look at where Rama is firing arrows at Ravana, the 10-headed demon. And you can see Hanuman here, who is helping him. Right, so as always, we've got some questions to go through. So if I get those up, and I'll talk you through them now. So, first question. Why does Hanuman change into a cat once he gets to the island? Bit of retrieval. Where was Sita? So you need to go back in the text and see if you can find out where was she. Remember, she wasn't in any of the bedrooms where Hanuman first looked, so where was she? Then for number 3, you've got to put the events of part of the story in order. So this is all about when Hanuman was pretending to be a cat. So use numbers 1 to 4 to put those in order. Number 4 says, how does Sarasa, the sea monster, die? No one fights her in the end, so how does she die? Number 5, what a fierce battle it was. That's taken from the text. So what sort of sentence is this? Tick the correct box. Is that a command, a question, a statement, or an exclamation? Look carefully at the punctuation. Think about how we're starting that sentence. For number 6, we've got another bit taken from the text. Ravana towered before Rama like an enormous volcano about to erupt as flames leapt out of his 10 noses and smoke billowed out of his 20 ears. How do you think Rama, Lakshmana, and Hanuman felt during this part of the story after they're starting to win the fight and then Ravana comes out like an enormous volcano? How do you think they're feeling and why? Need to see some inference there. And then last question, bit of retrieval. Where does Rama shoot Ravana? What part of the body does he shoot him in? And then finally, for the bonus challenge, it says, I really like the illustration at the end of this story when Rama and Hanuman work together to defeat Ravana. Can you draw a picture of this battle? So it's this picture we're talking about. So when Rama climbs up on Hanuman's shoulder, Hanuman whispers in his ear to shoot Ravana in the navel. So can you draw an illustration of this final battle? Right, that's our last guided reading of the half term done. As always, send us your work on eSchools when you're finished, and I will see you all later. Bye bye.